Hey everybody, welcome to Prompt and Circumstance. I'm David,
I'm Ilan.
and today we're going to talk about V0. All right, our agenda today is to go through a live demo of V0, an in-depth review of it, and finally, whether or not we're going to recommend it for our listeners. So, Ilan, before we start, what's new with you?
Well, I actually had a pretty funny story that happened literally right before we recorded. I was going through Facebook Marketplace and I saw something that really caught my eye. I actually sent it to you because it was pretty funny. This was an ad for a Hummer H1 where the person clearly used ChatGPT. And the reason I know they clearly used ChatGPT is the first line of the description is, "Here's a draft for your Facebook Marketplace listing for the 1996 Hummer H1." I mean, it was bound to happen. You know, we're in the age of ChatGPT, and good to see that people are leveraging these free to use AI tools. But yeah, the level of editing there, I thought was top notch.
Top notch. Yes, I think there's also the markdown that showed up in there as well,
Right.
which when you copy paste from GPT, it'll carry that over. But it is very exciting to see that there's tremendous adoption of these kinds of tools. At the gym, I hear people talking about GPT, and it wasn't maybe 2 years ago and change where I was the weirdo who's telling everybody, you got to try this out. It's going to change your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think ChatGPT is at over 500 million weekly actives. I had the same experience on the train earlier today. I was going into the city and ended up in a conversation with the person behind me who was talking about his company and how they're having to completely pivot their entire sales strategy around ChatGPT. And it was actually kind of fascinating to listen into. He was talking about how they have a per seat model, but it doesn't make sense for them anymore because with ChatGPT, they can reduce the number of people who need to use the product because they can make each person way more efficient. He's like, yeah, we're having to rethink how we're going to price this whole thing because if you don't need 50 people to use our tool because you can do the same work with 5 people, then we need to somehow come out whole on the other side too.
Yeah, it's remarkable how transformational these transformers are. Let's get into it. In fact, pricing is going to be one of the things that we'll be looking at V0.
There have been 700,000 tech layoffs since 2022. If you're hearing that number and you're thinking, oh man, I really need to start something on the side so I can have guaranteed income in case the worst happens, Colab has built just the product for you. Colab's validate and build products will help you validate your product idea and then build the MVP up to getting your first paying customers. They'll provide the structure, the expertise, and the accountability so that you can get your product launched and off the ground. And just for our listeners, if you click on the link below in the show notes, they will give you $250 off the validate and build products. It's an amazing offer, an amazing opportunity for you to gain independence and have something that you can fall back on in case the worst happens, or even for you to grow into and run your own company.
Vercel was founded in 2015 by Guillermo Rauch, and it was originally called Zeit. It was only in 2020 that it was rebranded to Vercel. And most recently, this company is valued at $3 billion.
It's a lot of tokens, David.
That certainly is. Yeah, so that valuation came in Series Z last year in 2024, and V0 is one of the many products that this company has to offer. In fact, they call it V0 because it's meant to be the beginning of something that you would create. It's V0 of whatever your product is going to be.
David, that's super exciting. And I was super excited to use this tool. Do we want to give people a quick live demo, show them how the tool works?
Yeah, let's do it. So here's Vercel. It its landing page is not unlike that of other prompt-oriented products. So at the very center, it's saying, hey, what can I help you ship, which is pretty awesome, very much geared towards what it's trying to do, which is to create products. So at the very center of it is a giant prompt box, and down below are examples of projects or products that others in the community have made. So what I'm going to do here is try to build something live. Let's go ahead and do this. You know what's an interesting problem for me is that as we go through this, I have this lovely rundown that you put together for us, and I can't see it. In fact, I would like very much to be able to flip through the rundown, and maybe why don't we make an app that'll do that?
Yeah, sounds great. Let's do it. We're also super excited to tell you about our friends from Querio. Querio is your AI data analyst that sits on top of your data layer and allows you to ask questions in natural language and give you insights directly. I actually use Querio in my day to day work, and I've loved how easy it is to learn information and how much time it saves me from having to write long SQL queries to dive into the data analysis and product analysis that I need. It's there for data geeks and normal peeps as well. If you want to write in SQL and give it more direct feedback, it can handle that. And if you want to see your data in beautiful charts and then dig into something and ask some questions of a specific data point, Querio can handle that too. And just for our listeners, they have a special offer. If you click on our link below and you tell them that David and Ilan sent you, they will give you 2 months free of their data product. That's an incredible value and can save you so much time in bringing out your product analysis and understanding what your customers are doing. Try it now. So for those of you on audio, the the site really is this main box. You know, if you're used to other AI tools, you'd be used to this. You'd be used to this UI as well. So David's typing in here. He's doing some on the fly prompt engineering. So he's telling Vercel to make an app that will take an input of bullet points that compose a rundown for a podcast and provide the individual bullet points as cards that the user can flip through. As he continues, I'll let you know. But again, for those on audio, the interesting thing that you see in V0 when you pop into it compared to Played or some of the other tools out there is you immediately get from the community. So it's kind of giving you these options to see what other people are doing with the tool. All right, David, you submitted your prompt. What's going on?
So it's just going. It didn't say anything much. It made a little project plan, and it just got to work coding. So here we are. It looks like this is TypeScript or it's a JavaScript. It's some kind of script, and it's just going ahead and creating all the various different components. And here we go. So it's asking me to provide the rundown. Okay. Well, let's see what it does. Let me go and grab a rundown.
Amazing. By the way, that was real time, guys. This literally worked in like, I don't know, David, what was that? 30 seconds, 1 minute to give us something to try out here.
Yeah, it was really quick. It does not copy over any formatting.
Let's see what happens if you just create the rundown like this.
So here we are. Well, first of all, the styling's not bad. I think it uses the styling that Vercel seems to like, which is that Shad CN styling that we see often. So here it's showing me the card, and I'm gonna go ahead and I need to start the timer manually, it seems. So off we go. Nice looking timer, and I've got the 24 cards here. And let's go ahead and flip through it. That's pretty good.
I did notice that it restarts the timer
It restarts the
on each.
timer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. Look at that.
This is pretty good.
This is good. So what happens if I go all the way to the end? Let's go ahead and do that. See the closing here, and that's it. Oh, I have a start over button at the bottom. Okay. Well, look at that. I think it managed to one shot that solution.
That's pretty impressive. I have to say that one of the most impressive things that I found about Vue Zero was how quickly it does work. Um, having used Replit before, which takes a little bit more time, is a little bit more thoughtful. They always come to you with an estimate like, "Hey, I'm going to take 2 minutes to come up with a plan, and then 10 minutes to give you a first working version." As V Zero is like, I'm thinking for 6 seconds, and then in 45 seconds you're going to have a usable app.
Mhm.
It's pretty cool in that respect.
It is pretty quick. I'm going to try to up the level of difficulty here, and I'm going to say turn this into a native Android app. What's your bet on how successful this is going to be?
Uh, I'm giving it. Uh, I'm gonna give it pretty long odds here, David.
Now, I am not an Android developer, but I really wonder whether it's able to do this because in order to run Android applications, you need a Java virtual machine, something like that. And I'm not sure whether it's able to do that here or if it would provide me with something that it would say, all right, take this out to some other application and run it there.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting thing to see. Let's see what happens. I think this is going to take a little longer. So while it's running, we have some categories to go through to think about this app. So the first category here is worst feature. So, David, what is your worst feature about V0?
I would say that the mobile friendliness of the web page is limited. Now, that might be asking a lot, but some of V0's competitors have a mobile app. So I tried using this with my phone on a web browser, and I found it to be difficult to navigate, and oftentimes I would get lost. So, for example, if it would generate the code and I wanted to get back to prompting, it was not obvious how I would do that. I found I had to swipe down from the top,
Hmm.
which is really counterintuitive to me. How about you?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, David. I found that thinking period to be really frustrating because if you actually go back up and open up where you click the little caret next to where it says thought for 6 seconds or whatever, you'll see that you actually can see the entire thinking process of the tool of V0. And funnily enough, Guillermo Rauch, he was on Lenny's podcast this week. And when he was talking about the tool, he's like, "Oh yeah, you read through what the tool is thinking. It tells you exactly what it's thinking, and then this is your moment where you can like pause it and tell it that, hey, actually, you're not going in the right direction. You can stop and kind of start over, reprompt it to get in the right direction. But if it thinks for 6 seconds, like that's not enough time for you to even read the first sentence of that text, let alone the entire thing, process it, think about whether it's doing the right thing or not, and then go back. I understand that speed is one of the features that you can bring to your product, and we talked about the speed of this one, but I found it really frustrating to not be able to really stop it and give it some feedback before it just goes and starts building something without even having giving me a full complete idea of where it's going.
Is very eager to serve.
It's so eager, so eager. And I don't know about you, David, but I've worked with developers who are kind of like this. You're like, hey, here's a half-formed idea that I'm thinking about, and then the next day they're like, yeah, I spent like the last 13 hours coding your thing. It's like, whoa, buddy! I just wanted to have a conversation about this first.
Well, now you can have hundreds of developers just like that.
That's right. It looks like it came up with something here. So where did we end up?
I'm not sure. Uh, okay, so to run this app, I need to go and do stuff. So this is where you need to have some technical abilities here, right? Because it is telling me to use Node Package Manager, which, thankfully I know like a little bit about that. But to somebody who is a non-technical person coming into here and seeing this instruction to run this app, create a new React to Native project, and here's the command. Yeah, node package command. Just go ahead and copy paste that into your CLI. So it's just not going to be so friendly for the non-technical person.
100%. But this actually can get into a little bit of a deeper review. Both of us tried this tool out this week and tried it out with different problems that we'd been working on. And I thought that I would share my experience here with V0 because I thought that it was pretty instructive to how it works. This week, what I tried to do was build a tool that I've had in my head for a really long time, like 2 years. I've had this thing in my head where every year I play fantasy basketball. And every year I try to think of a really fun way to select the draft order. And one time I found a super cool tool called 100 Yard Rush. It's meant for fantasy football, and you put in team names for your fantasy draft, and then you have little animated characters that run across the screen. It's kind of Tecmo Bowl styling if you played that game from kind of late 80s, early 90s Nintendo. And I was like, there should be a basketball version of this. I'm going to call it 50 Point Showdown. So players will shoot threes from around the 3 point arc, and whoever gets to 50 points first will end up being first in the draft order, and so on and so forth until everybody has crossed that threshold. But I have zero experience building anything visual, no kind of animation skills or anything like this, even though I've done a little bit of programming on the side. So I tried to build this in V0, and I also tried to build it at the same time in Replit as well, just to compare the two tools, see how it goes. And V0, I gave it a much longer prompt. This was something that, again, I took out from that interview I mentioned earlier on Lenny's podcast with the founder of Vercel. And some of the things that he mentioned were give it a lot of context, take it through the steps you want it to go through. Also, sharing screenshots is really helpful with V0. It's really meant to work off of a design that the user comes to it with.
I saw that you can add a Figma design or import something from Figma as part of this.
Yeah, exactly. I really do think that's something that is kind of cool about V0, right? They're really thinking about that type of user, somebody who's a little bit more like design oriented, but maybe wants to build something. And a lot of the examples that he gave of people who are doing the coolest stuff at Vercel with V0 because they dog food the tool themselves is are designers who have a little bit more of like a technical background. So anyway, gave it a bunch of context, shared a bunch of screenshots from this tool that I was comparing to, and it took
It's
some time.
almost like you need to give it a PRD.
You basically do. If you give it a full PRD, and this was another takeaway, right? It's kind of the more technical you are, the more not just technical but precise you are. Guillermo Rauch, he used this term tokens in the interview a lot. And what I took that to mean was not tokens in the ChatGPT API sense, but precise words that would explain what you mean in a single word. Anyway, being precise with V0 is the best way to get it to give you a really good output.
And I like also that your theme is set to dark. This is how we know that you are a real developer, unlike my light IDE there.
um, that or my eyes hurt. Uh, So it took a while, right? I'm not going to walk through the entire thing, but this took about 2 hours of prompting, um, getting something back, and then going through over and over again.
Now,
Um,
how was that time split? Was it if you put it onto a Pareto chart, what's the very first bar? Is it time thinking about your prompt, typing out your prompt? Is it the actual machine taking its time thinking?
Very first bar is watching the Bollywood movie that my wife and I were watching together while I was doing this. Second bar is thinking about the prompt. And then third one would be the tool thinking itself about, I would say thinking about the prompt and testing. So I would like each time it would come out with something and I would test it out, see how it worked. It was very much like working with a developer on a problem, right? You kind of hand off your PRD, they come back with something, they demo it to you, you try it out, you give them some feedback, and then you kind of circle through and you go like that. Um,
Except this developer doesn't say that it works on their local and calls it a day.
well, let me show you how well this works on my local. So after, like I said, a couple of hours, it came up with something. By the way, very cool feature here. Everything is mobile responsive. By default, if you're working in Vercel or in V0, anything that you prompt it to do will be mobile responsive. But let me open this up in a new tab.
I also wonder whether it's accessibility compliant, right? You know, with like the
Uh-huh.
ARIA tags and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't check that in here. However, I have heard that it is by default accessibility compliant. All right.
I
So,
like this. It already looks pretty cool with the basketball court and everything.
yeah,
So V0 generated that.
I'll talk about this in a minute, how I got the basketball court. But um, we got the basketball court. We can choose some teams. I'm just gonna use the default names. Coloring, definitely not the strong suit. Something I would want to work on here. Um,
Speaking of accessibility, the text contrast there is
yeah.
punitive.
Uh, And so I'm going to walk through the just initial setup steps. It also inferred a bunch of features from the screenshots I shared of the other tool, which is kind of cool. Like for example, one of the ways to make sure that your results are more random is just to randomize the order of the team names before you launch the automated gameplay. So you know, if some position of a team is for some reason a little bit more likely to win, then you're randomizing away from you know, whichever team always having that position. I didn't tell it to do that; it just came up with that based on my screenshots. And then I told it to be able to go very fast. And here we're going to start. And here we go. We have some
That's
guys
so
in
cool.
different uniforms who are shooting 3 pointers, and you see their arcs going yellow and sorry, green and red, and you end up with one team in first and a team in second. And one of the things I told it is that there has to be clear order. There cannot be any, you know, randomly two teams crossing the threshold at the same time. So pretty cool, right?
That's cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. So a couple of things that I noted that I think are worth mentioning. I ran out of prompts at the very end, and so this is why I wasn't able to finish some of the accessibility things like the coloring. But the first court that it came up with was terrible, and I actually used ChatGPT to generate this court image. And it actually did it properly. It was like through multiple versions, it was using that court and overlaying everything on top of it. And then at some point, we got to some errors. You mentioned earlier about the little button to click to tell it that an error occurred.
Yeah, that's right. So when an error occurs in the application, there's a little button that shows up and says, "Hey, I can take care of this error for you, I think." And then you click on it and it tries to solve it. And in an application that I had built using V0, it took care of the problem quite nicely.
Same thing happened here. I'm actually hovering over something where it says cannot destructure E as it is undefined at components slash basketball game. And that prompt just came from me clicking that button that David just talked about. So went through, and in one of these errors, for some reason, it got rid of my court design.
Oh
So
no.
this is the last prompt that I think I need to give it to just have a usable product, and then, you know, fixing some of the coloring. But I thought this was pretty great to go from 2 years of thinking about this to 2 hours while watching a movie and actually have, a working prototype for the product and something that, with maybe another hour, I feel like I could hit deploy and let people start using it.
Look out, Activision. Ilan is is about to sweep the market.
That's right. Yeah, I'm gonna come up with so many shitty games you wouldn't even believe. So yeah, that's I thought that was pretty cool. And I did mention that I had done the same thing in Replit at the same time. So while V0 was thinking, I would just copy paste the prompt into Replit, at least in the initial stages when I was kind of creating the game. Replit could not do it. It came up with a really great UI for the initial setup screens, and then it failed as soon as you tried to play the game, and then it would just get stuck on a loading screen. I kept prompting it to fix that loading screen, and after 4 prompts and something like $3 in credits used or tokens used, it still hadn't come up with anything. Whereas V0, I did this all in the free tier.
Wow. And yet you didn't subscribe. Think about how hurt those PLG people are.
Well, that should get us to our next section here. Where let's talk a little bit about the strategy and positioning of V0. Where do you want to start, David?
Well, first let's start talking about the ICP, the ideal customer profile that they seem to be targeting, and what problem V0 is solving for them.
Yeah.
So
So, what do you think? Who do you think that V0 is for?
I feel like it is for the semi-technical person to rapidly create prototypes as opposed to necessarily fully working software. But um, that's the current situation in terms of what the actual ideal is. I suspect that V0 or Vercel would be targeting a slightly broader market, maybe whether you are technical or not. So you don't have to be technical. You can just give it an idea. It'll generate a product for you, which you can then host on Vercel, which we can talk about in a little bit. So the problem really is maybe more so for the non-technical people,
Uh-huh.
where, hey, I have this idea, but I don't know how to program. So this is going to solve it for you, where you talk in natural language, you just describe the thing that you want to make. And even if you're not good at prompt engineering, maybe you could converse your way through it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have the same feeling, and I think that if I was a cut above where I am in terms of my know-how in terms of development, that I probably could have gotten to where I got to in this tool with fewer prompts. And even in their FAQs where they talk about, or it's not even FAQs, but they have an article about like best practices for using V0. They literally say to you to tell it to use this library or use this particular type of CSS code here, and it will do really well with that kind of prompt. So agreed with you. It's for the more technical kind of user. Like I can imagine somebody who's maybe I've met quite a few designer front end developer crossovers in my career, and I feel like those would be the ideal customer profile for V0. Be able to like really quickly whip up a prototype.
Yeah, and you picked prototype as well, rather than a full-on product that is going to be ready to go to market.
Uh-huh.
Um, the interesting thing is that um, the the things that we created don't have a very high dependency on the back end, on a
Uh-huh.
complex back end or complex architecture,
That's right.
where you might need to call on third-party APIs to do this and that.
Uh-huh.
I suspect that V0 would be able to do something like that to some extent, but I wonder what its limitations are.
Yeah, I noted that they had some kind of new feature pop-ups at the bottom of the screen while I was testing it out, and a couple of the things they mentioned were one that you could now prompt it to create a database for you Another was that you could prompt it to use ChatGPT in the background. Actually, I think they said any of the main LLMs. You can prompt it to use those, and you can prompt it to integrate with Stripe for payments. So they're
Well, that's
clearly
cool.
working on that.
Yeah. Well, that's really exciting. Speaking of Stripe and payment, why don't we talk a little bit about
What
the
a
business model
transition there, David.
or the pricing model? How about that? So you said that you ran out of prompts, was it? Is that the main way that they monetize?
So they have a very generous free tier in V0, and yes, they monetize. They have a like a basic $20 a month service or tier, which is the next one up after free, and then a $200 a month super user tier. And the main value prop that they're offering for upgrading your tier is the number of prompts that you get.
That sounds like it's incentive for you to have massive prompts each time that you give it one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also maybe why those really long prompts are very helpful. If you're going to use V0 in your team, maybe think about, you know, taking it away. Maybe go to ChatGPT and try and get ChatGPT to help you build a good prompt for V0. But yeah, they're trying to get you to use as many prompts as possible, and it's something that the founder talked about. The tool is the people who are most comfortable with the tool are comfortable with like continuously prompting it and kind of like tweaking it and directing it towards what they're trying to get to. What's interesting to me in terms of a growth strategy is why they don't give you an option just to add some extra prompts in the moment when you need them. That's that we have a category for stick it in the backlog, right? The product feature that they really could use, and that seems like such a great way to eke out a few extra shekels from the free tier users or those basic tier users. Is hey, you've arrived at the last point. You don't have to upgrade fully. You don't have to go $20 a month, but for an extra $10 we'll give you 150 more prompts, and so you can keep going with your project without having to commit to upgrading.
That's a great idea. It makes me think about how mobile games would be doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you need just a few more crystals to finish this level. Just buy it right now for $5. It's fine.
Was there anything else that you noted about their business model or pricing model that you wanted to touch on?
I thought it was interesting to compare it to similar products, like say Replit, which would be using checkpoints as how they would charge you. Um, I like here because you have a little bit more control over the pricing as
Uh-huh.
opposed to on Replit where it just kind of goes and decides for you when it needs to make a checkpoint.
Yeah, agreed. The pricing model of V0, as somebody coming in and who actually thinks about, hey, maybe I would want to use this tool, my day-to-day toolbox or week-to-week toolbox, it felt a little more honest.
And what's interesting also is the how generous the free tier is. And I wonder whether that has to do with how they really are trying hard to get people to host the application on Vercel. As we said, Vercel being the company that makes V0, I think the end game is that they would want all these applications to be hosted by them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they make it super easy to deploy to Vercel. And just for those of you who don't know, as David said, Vercel is a product that allows you to host. And the whole idea is like you can set up your whole cloud AWS infrastructure. Um, and that takes a lot of time and effort. Or you can just deploy with Vercel. And Vercel handles scaling and database sizing and making sure that you can deploy to millions of users all at the same time and whatever you need to hire an entire DevOps team to handle, Vercel just handles that for you. So really, that's where they're making most of their money. It's not really from V0 yet.
Yeah. I also noticed that they did not have any referral program, which
Uh-huh.
Replit does. And one would think that in a sort of market that V0 is in, that word of mouth really is a bit of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they clearly have a PLG strategy, at least for the types of users that we are. Now, one thing they did have um, an enterprise pricing tier, which, as I recall, when I looked at Replit, they did not have, or at least did not explicitly call out their kind of team pricing tier. I do believe that V0 has quite a few enterprise level clients where they actually have development teams who are consistently using V0 as part of their day to day. So I do wonder if maybe the reality here is that they have a PLG growth model as a side hustle, and the real growth model is more sales led.
So what do we think? Is this artificial or is it intelligence?
I lean to intelligence. I mean, I was pretty impressed with what I was able to do with V0 in not much time. Comparing it to one of its main competitors, and the fact that it was able to give me a better product in the same amount of time was impressive. The main thing is that it really is for those product teams who are a little bit more technical, still product teams, whatever teams, users in general, who are a little bit more technical. But I can totally see how this could accelerate your ability to bring prototypes to market or to your users to validate ideas faster. I call it intelligence. How about you?
I'd say so as well. I was able to three-shot a little product that had been on my mind for some time, and it was able to do it, and it looked quite nice with just three little prompts. One of which was just continue. By the way, I didn't spend that many tokens there on that one. So uh, this is really making me think seriously about maybe it's a tool that I would actually pay for in order to create these kinds of prototypes. Would you pay for this? Would you pay money for this?
I'm seriously thinking about it. I think both of us work with product teams in our day jobs, and after using V0 and Replit back to back, I would say that this one, considering the types of people who I work with on the team, this would probably be my recommendation in terms of a tool for us to subscribe to for our team. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say so. This is something that I would certainly recommend that people try out at the very least. And I wouldn't be surprised if some people begin to pay for it. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't get any of that referral money, though.
Darn it. All right. So that's it. That wraps up our review of V0 by Vercel. And so if you have any ideas of what we ought to review next, or if you have any feedback or ideas for us, then let us know.
Yeah, definitely. And especially if you have new categories that you think that you'd like us to add here, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And wherever you're listening to this, you just find us there and click like and click subscribe. And you can also follow us on YouTube and X, and probably by the time this is out, Blue Sky and Threads as well.